Why do women want to change you? Women have this obsessive tendency to want to change men, and they often do it even against their own best interest, because in the end they drive men crazy, who understandably end up distancing themselves. The goal is to understand what is happening in the other person, why they behave in a certain way, and see if in our own small way we can also welcome the other person with their peculiarities, because they take it for granted that some things need improving, but maybe that person wants to stay the way they are. It's not a given that he wants to change those things, right? And you might say, but are we really that comfortable in that calm? Well then, go be with a man. Here we are. So let's start with the main topic of the evening, the most important one, which is very, very funny and in my opinion also quite nice, though for you much less so, which is, why do women want to change you? I mean, we know women, it's a reality unfortunately. They often try to change men in all sorts of different ways, and there are reasons for this, and tonight we're going to look at all of them. So let's start with the various points, and I'll tell you how many there are, because there are quite a few, so I'll try to be a bit brief. There are 21 reasons, which are not excuses. I swear, 21 reasons and explanations that tell you why women often try to change you, and I assure you that most of them are not in women's favor. In fact, almost all of them are against women. So this isn't a feminist live stream where we say, oh, women are right, men are awful, they're wrong. Far from it. We're explaining why women have this obsessive urge to change men, and they often do it even against their own best interests, because in the end, they drive men crazy, men who, quite understandably, sometimes distance themselves or else put up with it if they have no other options. So let's look at why some women do this and how we can not necessarily justify them, but at least try to understand them. Okay, let's try. The goal is to understand what's going on with the other person, why they're behaving a certain way, and to see if in our own small way we can, again, I'm not saying justify, but at least accept the other person, even with their quirks. This doesn't mean, however, that the woman can, let me be clear, continue to behave badly, especially if these attempts to make you change come across as something heavy, aggressive, or even worse, belittling, and so on. Okay, so let's look at the explanations. I'll try to go a bit quickly with the first point because there are quite a few. The first point is the idealization of the partner, which basically means that when a woman first meets a man, by the way, men do this too, just to be clear, she projects onto him an ideal image of how she would like him to be. I'll explain it in a really simple way. This image obviously never matches the reality of who that man actually is. It's what she wishes he would be, so she can feel happier, safer, and more content. And then what happens is that over time, as they get to know each other better, she realizes that he's not actually how she imagined him to be. So starting from this idealization, she begins to try to make him fit her image as much as possible. Okay, so it's a need that's a bit, let's call it this way, selfish, personal. She wants the man to be the way she imagined or wished he would be. Be careful though, let me clarify. This idealization is not always just the result of the unhealthy mind of the person doing the idealizing. Many times, unfortunately, it's also supported by the fact that the other person tries to present themselves as someone different, as someone better, much better, while hiding a lot of parts of themselves. However, this doesn't mean that we should present ourselves as awful from the start, because otherwise no one would choose us. Okay, so let's try to show our best sides, but without lying, without hiding ourselves too much, without altering ourselves too much, so that the other person can also have a realistic idea. Then there are also people who actually take that thing and exaggerate it, or In some way, they try to minimize it so that it's not noticeable and there's nothing we can do about that. But this is one of the reasons, just to be clear. So speaking selfishly, the woman thinks, I'd like it to be this way. So now I'll try to make him become like I imagined at the beginning, when he seemed better than he is now. The second reason is the nurse instinct. That is, we know that often women, and unfortunately men too, have this nurse tendency to want to save the man, right? So they unconsciously choose a problematic man, someone who is suffering, full of issues, and they want to turn him into a better version of who he is. So they actually end up choosing exactly the kind of person who is already, well, troubled. He's going off the rails in some way. And you might say, well, isn't this a nice thing, right? That women act like nurses toward a man who maybe has a problem and she takes him and helps him, right? It's nice. But actually, no, it's really bad, because this second point, this nurse-like behavior, is closely and dysfunctionally linked to point number 3, which is the fear of abandonment. So what does the nurse do? She tries to mold her partner, that poor wretch she picked up because he was in bad shape. So she thought, all right, I'll take him and then I'll shape him, because after all, he's objectively wrong. Maybe he does drugs, he's a criminal, he drinks, he smokes, he does the worst things, objectively wrong. Now I'll take him, I'll fix him up the way I like so that he'll become attached to me, because he'll see me as his savior. And if he then sees me as his savior, he won't abandon me. He won't leave me, because he becomes dependent on me, in the sense that unconsciously he believes he's good, worthy, a person of value only if he's with me. And this, as we know, is clearly a dysfunctional way to keep the other person tied to you, always, because, poor thing, the one who does this is afraid of being left and abandoned. And so she acts in this way, okay? In reality, many women are afraid they won't find a better man. And if the man they're currently in a relationship with seems suitable in some ways, in this case, women prefer to go for option 3, meaning they try to change this person in order to keep him, okay? So I keep him, I change him, and I keep him like that because I won't find anyone better anyway, okay? The fourth reason why a woman tries to change a man is the illusion of change. That is, she believes that, in her view, with love and patience, just like you might do with a stray animal, he can become the right person, okay? So she says, if I devote myself to this person, this is a somewhat more charitable option compared to the first one. I take a person, not necessarily someone down on their luck, even just a normal person who maybe has given me some attention or has some qualities I like. I care about him. I give him lots of love. I take care of him and so on. And surely this person will then shine and become the person I want by my side. Yeah? But this point is connected to point number 5, which is the need for control. Because some women often feel the need to control their partner to avoid uncertainties and instabilities that the partner might actually bring in certain cases. But in general, life itself brings instability and potential problems, right? So many times women feel the need to control their partner, because the more they control him, the more they manipulate and manage him, the more they feel safe. And you might ask, safe from what? I mean, what could this thing possibly be that they need to feel safe from? In general, it's a very primitive, very ancestral issue. It's not a rational matter. That is, a woman always feels fundamentally on a primitive level that she is weaker than a man. So she feels she can't make it on her own in the world, can't manage, can't survive by herself. You might say, It's not like we're in the Cretaceous period where we necessarily have to survive, I don't know, monsters that want to devour us. However, for many thousands of years, this feeling has, in fact, has, as a result, actually become deeply embedded and ingrained in the female collective unconscious as a sense of, I can't do it on my own. And actually, if you think about it, when a woman is pregnant, when she has just given birth, or generally speaking in terms of physical strength, she is less autonomous compared to a man. And so the need for control serves in some way to soothe this sense of insecurity, okay? And so they often use this approach, sometimes even a loving one, of trying to change their partner in order to ensure that they have someone by their side who can provide for them in some way, right? Or also perhaps to prevent the partner from doing something wrong, something that could potentially put her in danger, right? So I control them, I supervise them. That way I can see that this person doesn't actually engage in behaviors that could be dangerous for me, like, for example, I don't know, cheating, or maybe some kind of, I don't know, harm they could cause to the children, to the house, anything like that. That is, women tend to control for this reason. This is clearly closely linked to how a woman may have experienced things even in childhood, okay? Specifically because we have this perception, this fear that something might happen. All controlling people have this feeling, this fear that something might happen. Let's take an example. Let's pretend that when this girl was little, her mother forgot to pick her up from school, maybe when she was in kindergarten. Let's just pretend, okay? For small children, this is already a sign of unreliability on the part of the parent. In this case, an unreliability from a parent when a child is little clearly means that they could die. Let's imagine that the child, the little girl, is outside the school waiting for her mom, and some unfortunate person comes by and kidnaps her, right? Nowadays, teachers are careful and so on, but back then it wasn't always exactly like that. So that's also a life-threatening danger for the person. If I forget to pick up my daughter from school, she might perceive that as a danger. And as a result, when she grows up, she could become a woman who needs to control everything and everyone to make sure it never happens again, that her partner, so to speak, forgets about her. And so she might always feel like there's some danger going on. Obviously, these things are unconscious, but it's important to explain them, right? Because many times women react for these reasons as well. The sixth reason is low self-esteem. That is, a woman might unconsciously, due to her deep insecurities, believe that she doesn't deserve an adult, mature, responsible man. And so many women unconsciously look for men of little worth, always in quotation marks, of course, mediocre people, because they themselves feel like they aren't worth much, okay? And so they don't think they deserve more or better or people of greater value. So they seek out people of little importance. This also answers the question, why do some women end up with troubled men? This is also one of the reasons. And then once they've chosen this guy who, poor thing, is just mediocre and maybe is fine with that and lives well enough, they try to improve him and change him because they think, well, the more I improve him, the better, right? But not too much, though. Be careful, not too much, because if you improve him too much, then he becomes attractive to other women. So I'll improve him, but not too much. That's the reasoning. I know these things are a bit unpleasant. Point number 7, emotional dependency, meaning that change is seen as a way to keep the other person close and make the relationship indispensable, which is somewhat similar to what the rescuer does. But people who are emotionally dependent actually try to initiate a change to get the other person to start changing, but then to keep that person in a situation where they don't really change. They don't make significant progress, so that this dependency remains, which then becomes a codependency. That is, the emotionally dependent woman somehow keeps the man dependent on her without ever really allowing him to grow. She only gives him the impression that she could be someone who might help him, who might change him. Maybe every now and then there's the feeling that this person could actually do something for the man, but in reality it doesn't happen. She maintains a codependency through a psychological bond. Another reason, number 8, is the maladaptive and dysfunctional paternal parental model. Let me explain. That is, if as a child this now adult girl, adult woman lived with an absent, unstable, or problematic father figure in her life, then as an adult she might choose romantic partners in order to try to solve their problems, having made a sort of psychological transference from the father figure to her current partner, and unconsciously trying to fix her father's shortcomings within the relationship and in the man she has chosen. Does that make sense to you? Is that clear? So she tries to resolve the past by changing the present, meaning her current partner. Usually they even choose someone who is similar to their father in terms of dysfunctionality. Number 9, simply put, is that a woman might try to change a man if, over the course of the relationship, she realizes that he has values and goals that are different from hers. Because so often people fall in love and get together without ever thinking about what their values and goals are, right? At the beginning, you fall in love. It's not like you make a checklist of goals to see if the other person has everything you hope for, right? So you fall in love, then you find yourself in this relationship, and then you realize that maybe your goals are different, your values are different. So the woman says, well, now I'll change him, so maybe he'll be more like me, and maybe the relationship can go on. Often this even comes from a positive intention, meaning it's not that the woman is bad because of this, okay? Let's make that clear. It's simply a way she tries to keep the relationship going, to shape the situation so that the gap in values and goals is reduced. Number 10, the feeling of dissatisfaction. That is, the partner might not meet certain emotional needs, leading the woman to want to change him in order to get what she's missing. By emotional needs, we mean, for example, a sense of support, security, presence, help, all those things she needs. However, since she feels dissatisfied, the dissatisfaction she experiences isn't actually the man's fault at all. Rather, it's an issue that stems from her own lack of emotional maturity. Do you understand? Okay. But instead of fixing herself, instead of saying, wait, I'll handle my own sense of security, I'll deal with my own fears, what does she do? She says, no, you have to give them to me. So she feels a sense of dissatisfaction and tries to soothe that dissatisfaction by, so to speak, forcing her partner to fill her emotional voids, to give her more than paradoxically she is willing to give herself. Point 11. 11 is the comparison with other couples, because many times women chat among friends, among themselves, chit-chatting away, and it comes out that, my husband didn't do this either, but then I did this and that, and he learned to do it. Or, my husband, my partner, my boyfriend doesn't do it. Neither does mine. Then we deserve it. Yes, they support each other so as to find a solution or to copy what their friend did with her partner in order to optimize their own relationships. And they compare notes and try, in their own way, to improve things on partly to fit in with others, and also just to feel better in general, right? The intention isn't always negative. In fact, in the minds of the women who act this way, the intention is good-natured, not malicious, okay? It's always well-intentioned. 12. The need for adaptation. That is, if the relationship is unstable or difficult, if it already has problems, trying to change the partner can be seen as the solution to make it more stable. So, is our relationship a problem? Okay, then I'll change you so that maybe things will get better for us, right? Here too, the intention is clearly good. But regarding this need for adaptation, let's say that, first of all, women often don't include themselves in the equation, okay? And it should. But some women do include themselves in the equation, of course, and try to adapt their partner in order to feel better as a couple. In this sense, let's give some credit to women here. Women, point number 13, have a broader perspective compared to men. Or rather, obviously, I have to generalize here. Most women are better at finding, at seeing the big picture, at having an overall vision, at understanding the general context. Whereas men in general tend to be a bit more narrowly focused on individual events. They tend to see the single event in particular to deal with the specific problem that has just occurred, but they almost never see the bigger picture, right? They can't do it precisely because of the way their brains are structured. There are actually studies that explain the neural connections. They really struggle, especially in these relational areas, to consider that a specific event that may have caused a problem isn't just that event, but rather the sum of many events, or that event together with something that happened maybe months earlier and so on, right? In fact, men get really angry with women saying, "Oh, but you keep bringing up things that happened a long time ago." A woman does this when she feels that the issue still hasn't been resolved, okay? So, since women have an overall perspective, as I mentioned in point 12, they see and try to change things before it's too late, before the problem becomes too big. Men, on the other hand, see only the individual problem and say, "Oh my God, she's making a big deal out of nothing," because maybe something trivial or silly happened. Nothing serious, it's true, but the woman is able to connect it and put together the bigger picture, though not always in the right way, okay? It's not that women don't make mistakes, but generally they can be more anxious about a situation precisely for this reason. Let's take an example. Let's pretend that last night the man forgot to take out the trash, okay? The garbage collectors came by, the sanitation workers came by and didn't take the trash, which maybe smelled bad. And the woman gets angry saying, "But you were supposed to take out the trash. I told you to do it," and so on. It's a trivial thing. Nobody died, you might say. So why does the woman get so mad? Because probably it's possible that, for example, a month ago, the man might have forgotten to go to the pharmacy, like when she asked him, "Go get me Brufel because I have a headache," and maybe he forgot, said, yeah, I'll go, and then didn't go. Again, you might ask, what's the problem there? It can happen. After all, a person isn't a soldier. These things happen. Yes, but maybe the month before that, he had forgotten to tell her that the utility bill had arrived in the mail. Maybe he just put it aside somewhere. They hadn't paid the bills, and maybe one day the company reduced their power supply. So you might say, well, nothing serious here either, right? It's just an example. But tomorrow, this guy who forgets something today will forget something else tomorrow. But the woman doesn't forget. I mean, you see a single event and say, well, nothing happened. But not the woman. She sees a lack of attention and thinks, this person isn't careful, and tomorrow he might not be careful about something serious. Maybe you forget to turn off the gas. Okay, now there are stovetops that shut off by themselves, but maybe someone forgets to turn off the gas or forgets the child in the car. I mean, even more serious things can happen. So in this case, the woman might, for example, try to change the man if she sees that in the bigger picture, there's a recurring problem that could, in the long run, lead to something more serious. Not necessarily a problem of physical survival, right? Even if the man tells a little lie today and then another one in a week, all small white lies, the woman isn't stupid. She notices it, she sees it, she thinks, liar, liar. But this thing could become a problem in the long run because maybe tomorrow he'll lie to me about something important. Okay? Just to explain it to you. Point 14, innate tendency toward education. That is, women have always had and have always played the innate instinctive role because they are mothers, or for whatever reason you want, because they are more empathetic, more sensitive, however you want to put it. But in general, it has always been women who, generally speaking, of course, have had the tendency toward educating children, toward raising kids. And so if the man is not, because as we know, it can often happen that he may not be quite as mature as she is, the woman might have that teacher-like impulse kick in and say, now I'll fix him, I'll educate him, I'll straighten him out, because if I educate him, then he'll grow and develop, because she really has that instinct for educating. When she sees that there's something that can be improved or taught, it's really in her blood, in her DNA, and she just gets this urge to educate. Okay? So she might start acting like a teacher, right? You have to do this, you have to do that, more like your dad. It's just her nature. Okay? 15, expectations about personal growth. The woman might believe that it's her job to help her partner mature, especially, as I mentioned in the previous point, if he happens to be a bit less mature than she is, which sometimes happens. And so she might think it's her responsibility to help her partner improve, to mature, to overcome certain limitations. And maybe in some respects, the woman, who is usually more intuitive, generally speaking, might see things more clearly, notice before the man does that there's actually something that needs attention and possibly something that needs to be worked on, okay? Maybe the woman, precisely because she has this overall perspective, might notice much earlier than the man that there's an aspect of him that could cause a problem or that could be improved, even for his own personal benefit. Not necessarily just for the couple, but also for him, because maybe that way he'll feel better. And so she might, perhaps being more sensitive, also be more attuned to personal growth and want, in fact, to contribute to the improvement of herself and the couple in her own unique way, right? Number 16 is the perception of man as incomplete, because alas, some women may have unfortunately grown up in situations where the father figure was frequently scolded and repeatedly reprimanded by the mother. And so if a woman, when she was a child or a young girl, always saw her mother speak badly of her father, saying that the father was good for nothing, an idiot, and so on and so forth, she might have over time gradually internalized a persistent voice telling her that men are wrong. Okay? A man is not fine the way he is. So she might have the instinct to want to change him regardless of how he actually is. Okay? So she tends to see more of his flaws than his good qualities and wants to improve him. Again, there is no right or wrong here. Unfortunately, many times that's how it is. Our past, in one way or another, whether a lot or a little, for better or worse, influences us. Let me see, 17, like that. Lack of initiative or ambition. That is, sometimes there are men who are passive, who are not very motivated, who are simple, maybe they are fine living like that, meaning they don't need too many things. And so the woman might feel compelled, because maybe she's different, she has a bit more energy, to give him some direction. If the man doesn't really know what he wants to do, doesn't have much of an idea about the direction of the relationship, about what he wants to do in life in some cases, or maybe he has a good job but no passions, nothing else, the woman might feel that he's a bit passive, a bit on the depressive side, and think, now I'll push him, I'll help him myself. Because men are often creatures of habit. Maybe they're content with a life made up of, I don't know, work, sports, eating, having sex, and that's enough for them. Maybe they don't set other goals. And so the woman might say, well, now I'll push him myself. Also for his personal growth, and of course, for the well-being of the relationship as well. Obviously, yes, let's say it, this too, besides being a serious risk in general for the relationship and for personal vitality. Well, the fact that a man can be, in fact, so insufficiently motivated in certain cases, in these situations, this kind of behavior could actually push the woman to ask for a definition. That is, she might say, in personal and relational terms, to lay down an ultimatum, meaning to say, listen, either we have some goals, or we want to go somewhere, or we want to do something. I don't know. Do we want to start a family? Do we want to have children? I would like more initiative. I would like more fun. And so in this case, the woman can sometimes become a bit overbearing or a bit aggressive, repetitive in her attempts to get the man to move out of that calm. And you might say, but Daniela, we feel so good in that calm. And in that case, be with a man, because in reality, women are not that much more restless from this point of view. Unfortunately, 1818, communication problems. So if he has difficulty expressing emotions or needs, as sometimes happens, women who are actually good, generally better than men at doing this, generally, I repeat, might want to teach the man to open up, to teach him to express his own emotions and needs. Women are very good at this because, and we don't know if that's a virtue or a flaw, they are really skilled at digging into you and forcibly pulling out your emotions. If they can't get the good ones out, they'll bring out the less pleasant ones. Basically, they'll push you to exhaustion until you show some kind of emotion. It's a bit like when children are little. If they don't get attention from their parents, the good, healthy attention that a parent should give their child, they try to get attention by causing trouble or getting into mischief so that the parents focus on them and give them attention, right? Women do more or less the same thing. If you don't show me your positive emotions, as long as you give me some kind of emotion, something from yourself, even if you're more reserved, since men are usually a bit more closed off, then I'll draw them out of you, whether gently or not. Either you show me the good emotions, or I'll behave in a certain way and even drive you crazy and make you lose it just so you'll show me some emotions. Okay? And as annoying as it may seem, and even though women often don't know how to do it the right way, this thing about drawing out emotions, often they might accuse the man or get angry. So they actually do it in a way that's questionable. Paradoxically leads the man to close himself off even more. But in and of itself, this action, this activity is useful and indispensable. In other words, the fact that a woman pushes, even clumsily, the man to bring out his emotions is very helpful for him, for his personal growth and for the growth of the relationship. In fact, number 19, low emotional intelligence. That is, since the partner often has difficulty understanding, feeling, and managing emotions, including those of the woman herself, not just his own, but also understanding and handling the woman's emotions, she may end up feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood, unsupported, neglected, and so on. In this case, from a purely selfish point of view, and also importantly for the good of the relationship, the woman tries to help the man improve in this area. So in this sense, she does it, especially if the man, besides not expressing his own emotions or how he feels in general, as I mentioned in the previous point, is also unable to understand the woman. So at this point, she does it purely for selfish reasons, but not in a bad way. I mean, it's selfish, but not necessarily wrong. Because for a man to wake up, if you'll allow me the expression, and start to understand how the person in front of him works, is not wrong at all. Number 20, objectively dysfunctional behaviors. So let's suppose that the man objectively has some problems, not just flaws, but vices, harmful habits, toxic attitudes, all those behaviors that can actually cause problems. Doing drugs, drinking, smoking, chasing women, cheating, in short, all sorts of things. And in this case, the man objectively has things he needs to fix. So she says, okay, there are objectively things that need to be addressed. If these issues are real, especially with a view toward building a family or having children before having a future with you, I'll fix you up according to how I imagine a family should be in the future, okay? I mean, I simply won't have a child with you if you don't have a steady job, if you do drugs, if I know you're cheating on me. I mean, some women do it, but even the women who do this end up suffering, right? So in this sense, they can simply be right. The only problem is that many times they don't do a double check, meaning they don't go and see if the man also wants to improve these things, because they take it for granted that certain things need to be improved, but maybe that guy wants to stay just the way he is. It's not a given that he wants to change these things, right? And so here too, there are communication problems, because, okay, I'll help you change. That's perfectly fine. But first, I need to see if you're willing to do this because you also want to improve these things. Because it's clear that if a woman decides to change a man, let's say, for example, he likes to drink, the woman decides to change a man, but he doesn't want to change that habit because he's fine with it. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. We don't care. He's fine with it as it is. If she tries to change a habit that he's happy to keep, it turns into chaos, into suffering, or he ends up having to suffer, having to somehow limit what he wants to do. In short, then he blames the woman for it if he gets angry, if he's irritable, if he feels emasculated, forced to be someone he's not. Maybe the woman says, but I'm helping him. Yeah, but that's assuming he even wants to be helped, simply put. And finally, the last one, which in my opinion is the best, really the best, is number 21. So number 21, it's distraction from oneself. That is, in this case, women, but men do it too. Almost everything I've mentioned can more or less be done by men as well. But in this case, since we're talking about women in relation to men's changes, women can become extremely focused on changing their partner, and sometimes even unconsciously choose him specifically for this reason. Because the more I focus on the other person, the more I waste, or rather spend my time with that person trying to change them, the less time and energy I have to look at myself and change myself, okay? And so I pick someone who needs saving. That's why troubled people are so popular. I pick someone to save so I can fully devote myself to doing just that. I might even feel better about myself in the end because I help them. And throughout this whole process, I don't look inside myself. I'm not looking at myself because I don't have time, because look at that person, see how they're doing. I absolutely have to keep an eye on them, right? You see how they are, right? They're in a bad way, aren't they? And so, bam, that's it. Did you see what a nice little picture of deep discomfort lies behind the fact that women want to change men? It's not just serious discomfort on the women's side, though there's plenty of that when it comes to personal growth. but really in general, right? I mean, it's not as though men in this entire scenario are completely pure, flawless, and perfect individuals either. Because honestly, nobody is without their own faults or imperfections. They have their own limitations too. Because it's true that women can be a pain sometimes. Yeah, we get that. But why? Some things are just about her, but most of the time it concerns both of them. And almost always, all of this also has to do with a lack of dialogue, of clarification, even before starting the relationship in some cases. And above all, it has to do with a lack of initial discernment. I mean, most people fall in love, they sleep together, there's chemistry, there's an emotional, affective bond of codependency. And before all this mess, they don't actually check if they're truly compatible people. Okay? So here too, just a bit of intelligence, perhaps a little self-awareness, and the ability to thoughtfully manage yourself in the initial phase of the relationship wouldn't hurt. It really wouldn't be a bad thing at all. And that was everything, the whole picture I needed to tell you about. I remind you, and I'll repeat it, and now I'll move on to your questions. I remind you that everyone who has already purchased one of my products from the store or who has been following my content for several months and is therefore already on the right track can request a free written mini consultation through the message center or by emailing me at info@danielacoin.it, so that if you're feeling a bit stuck, you can figure out where you are and which direction you want to go, okay? So what to do, how to continue on your own path, some tips and suggestions. And the link is in the comments. You can request this mini consultation through the message center or by email. Tom said, no one can improve your self-esteem. Certainly, if you're with a woman who tears you down, it's better to leave her as soon as possible. Yeah, but even here, I want to point something out, right? Someone might say, if you're with a woman, Tommaso said, if you're with a woman who tears you down, it's better to leave her as soon as possible. Yes, but before that, and even better before you leave her, then you can leave her. Okay, fine. But before leaving her, wouldn't it be useful to understand why this woman is behaving this way and destroying my self-esteem? Well, of course, it's right that a woman, as much as possible, even from my point of view, should support the man. That's correct. But sometimes women are less inclined to support the man because maybe they see in this person someone who isn't putting in enough effort, who could do much more but doesn't. Someone who maybe says they want to do something, but deep down doesn't really want to do it. And so she feels less motivated to support this person. This isn't an excuse because clearly it would be better to support each other. But if the person isn't used to dialogue and, how can I put it, to functional communication, it's possible that by default they have ways of communicating that aren't entirely healthy. And in this case, if the man doesn't seem reliable, doesn't seem like someone who truly wants to work on himself, sometimes it's possible that the woman isn't very inclined to support him in terms of self-esteem. Of course, if someone treats you badly, insults you, belittles you, then yes, that's a person you should distance yourself from, someone who first needs to go and resolve their issues with a good psychiatrist or psychologist. And then clearly, maybe, yes, have a relationship. Ken says, hi, Daniela, but if women are by nature hypergamous and choose the best possible partner, how is it possible that they end up with troubled men and then try to change them instead of leaving them? Well, first of all, women are hypergamous, sort of, but not more than men, in the sense that even the man chooses the best party, just not on an economic level, okay? That is, a man has different criteria for choosing. He might not choose the richest or most powerful woman, as female hypergamy can sometimes lead women to do, meaning to choose the richest, most attractive, most powerful man, and so on. But men, for example, also have a tendency to choose in similar ways. It's not uncommon for a man to leave say an older woman for a younger one, or perhaps a more serious, thoughtful woman for someone who's more fun, lighthearted, and carefree. In other words, these are in fact very similar situations. Anyway, very often, Ken, to answer your question, women are hypergamous if they can afford to be. Not all of them can. And those who have low self-esteem or all the issues I've explained up to now can easily choose partners who are a bit more troubled and won't leave them unless they find someone better. Because, as you said, a woman who has gotten involved with someone troubled and is trying to change him ends up stuck there and rarely even sees other options. Okay? This is also important needs to be specified. So, if she finds an alternative, is it possible that she would leave the troubled person to go to someone better? Yes. The point is that a woman or even a man who has low self-esteem, who feels inferior, who has issues of this kind and is generally attracted to dysfunctional partners, if they find a functional person, either they are not wanted by this healthy person or they might actually be wanted. And in that case, they can easily change and get on the better train. But everyone does this, not just women. Women might do it in some ways, men in others. And choosing the person with whom you feel better or believe you'll feel better is something everyone does. Salvatore says, question, who perceives the danger? The child left alone at school? Referring Salvatore to the previous question, yes, I explained the issue clearly. That is, if a child, when young, can perceive a danger, so a lack of the feeling of being able to rely on the adult figure, then as an adult, this boy or girl can transfer this onto their partner and therefore might have a greater need for security because they didn't feel it in childhood. Salvo says, hi, Daniela, I would accept a woman who inspires me to change for the better and who also puts effort into nurturing the relationship itself. But doesn't the term change undermine a man's self-esteem? A weakness? Yes, I understand, Salvo. Your question is smart because Salvo rightly says, if someone tells you that you have to change, it means they're telling you they don't accept you for who you are. And that's exactly how it is, in the sense that I understand what you're saying. And in my opinion, it's just a more polite way of defining what reality is, that when you're with someone, there are some things about that person that you accept. You love them anyway, and that's perfectly normal. Usually you love and accept the things that don't pose major risks to you or the ones you can understand and make sense of. The things you can understand and make sense of, you can keep because in reality, you don't need to change them. They're not a big problem. In some way, they're manageable. Most of the time, as I've explained throughout this live session, a woman tries to change things, either because, in her view, those things she wants to change are dysfunctional, highly dysfunctional, and therefore potentially dangerous, or because in the act of trying to change the other person, she is actually seeking to fulfill some other need. However, I understand the point that trying to change someone can undermine self-esteem, but I'll answer you by saying that self-esteem doesn't come from outside. I mean, if self-esteem comes from outside, then other people can change it, right? They can alter its characteristics. But our self-esteem that comes from within can't be changed by someone else. I mean, if a woman tells you that you're not good enough as you are, or behaves in ways that basically say you're not good enough and you need to change, and you feel your self-esteem is undermined, it means you already believe you're not good enough even before she says. That's why what she says takes root. This doesn't mean we have to keep people around us who tell us we're wrong, not good enough, and so on. If you think it's wrong, if you feel it's an unjustified attempt to make you change and so on, you absolutely shouldn't go along with it. Okay? Giovanni said he reads maps better. Men read maps better. Even though actually, for example, I'm not a man, the last time I checked, but I have an insane ability to read maps, especially in survey mode. Daniela says, for me, the problem doesn't arise. I've never been chosen, so I can't be changed. And that's an excellent strategy, Daniele. Thank you. Not getting chosen so you don't have to be changed. I approve of it. And guys, I have to tell you because the other day I saw, well, actually last night, I'll tell you this just as a funny story. I saw the best comment I've ever received. No, actually, it was a private message on Instagram from a guy who said, Daniela, congratulations on your YouTube videos. I always watch them. He wrote exactly like this. I swear it was written just like this. If you want, I can look it up and read it to you because it was exceptional. He said, when you make videos where you talk about the qualities a man should or shouldn't have, and I have them or I don't have them, that's when I watch the video. But if I don't have those things I'm supposed to have, I stop the video. And then he added the final sentence, this is how I work on my personal growth. If you say things that suit me that I already have, and so I feel good about myself, then I watch the video. But if you say things I don't have and I feel flawed, like there's something wrong with me, then I don't watch the video. A genius, right? I swear. I got this comment. Tony said, sometimes though you do experience some positive changes. I believe I've learned something from every relationship. Well done, Tony. And as a result, I've improved my skills, even after taking some hard knocks. I agree with Tony, but not everyone agrees with these theories, right? I mean, I agree that all experiences, both good and bad, help us in some way to get to know ourselves better, to look within, to improve ourselves. Obviously, though, that's not a reason to necessarily stay in a relationship that doesn't fulfill you, okay? He says, how can one tell if her need to change a man comes from selfishness or if she truly does it to enrich our person? Well, I would answer that if the benefits that is, if the changes and therefore the benefits that come from them, whether she or both of you gain from this relationship, if all the benefits are for her and you end up worse off, feeling more miserable, emptier, more tired, more sad, and so on. And instead she feels better because the benefits only make things easier for her, then she is probably acting out some rather selfish dynamics. If, on the other hand, despite the effort, because maybe changing certain things does take effort, despite the effort, you recognize that these changes she is pushing you to make are also useful for you, meaning they bring you a benefit in the long run. Well, in the sense that obviously in the moment it can be tiring, in the moment it can also be difficult, and I understand that. But if in the long run you see that the changes she is encouraging you to make are also useful for you, well, then I would say that most likely she is doing it for you, for the relationship, and for herself. Okay? In other words, the benefit should be all-encompassing. If, on the other hand, she is happy and you are increasingly miserable, then obviously it means that the change is not healthy. All right, guys, Canio said. Here's the last question. A relationship is also about individual growth, but it should be desired by both people to improve together, not something imposed, don't you think? Yes, exactly, Canio. That's precisely the concept. That's the essence, in the sense that it's fine if the woman, the man, whoever it is, it doesn't really matter who is the one encouraging change. It's fine if one or even both people are pushing for change, though usually it's one, and most often it's the woman. That's perfectly fine, absolutely fine. The important thing is that this change is desired by both parties, that it's also, let's say, somewhat agreed upon, not necessarily planned out in detail, but at least that the general direction of the change is shared. You can't tell someone you have to change and be the way I want you to be, if being the way I want might mean that person has to go against their own nature, feel worse, or maybe for some reason they just don't want to make that change. Also, trying to change someone into what we think they should be is, in fact, really, truly very dangerous. Because most of the time, almost always, we force someone to change according to how we believe they should be. And if they don't want to, okay, we seriously risk pushing that person into a nervous breakdown, neurosis, panic attacks, delusions, and other problems, okay? Here, another problem arises, and I want to make this clear as well. Sometimes a man says he wants to change that thing just because he wants to please the woman and keep her, or he says he wants to change that thing simply because rationally he thinks the change is right and proper. But this doesn't mean that on a deeper level, he actually wants to change this thing, okay? So if I say, yes, I want to change this thing, but on a deeper level, I don't actually want to. And the other person, in this case, the woman, says you have to change, you have to do this and that. And I say, yes, it's right, but I don't want to do it because I just don't feel like it. I'm not up for it. It's clear that even in that case, I could end up with neuroses, okay? Because I have to force myself to do something that deep down I don't want to do and don't find useful. Maybe rationally, yes. Do you guys understand the difference between something rational and something that isn't rational? I mean, I can say that rationally, it's right to go to work from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, that it's right to have a salary and do the grocery shopping and take the kids to daycare and so on. But on a deeper level, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to the office at 8 in the morning. I want to sleep until noon. I don't want to take the kids to daycare. Why should I have to? I mean, do you understand the difference between what I rationally think is right to do and what deep down I just don't want to do? The closer we are and the more we manage to unite the part that we consider right with what on a deeper level we feel is healthy for us, the better we feel. But the more there is a split between these two parts, the worse we feel. And this can create serious problems in a relationship, because if a man says like, yes, I want to quit smoking, the woman might start checking to make sure he's not smoking. He feels controlled. They're not working together. Yes, he wants to quit smoking because she's been nagging him, but he actually wanted to quit smoking. He quit so she would stop nagging him, but he didn't really want to do it. And so instead of doing something like not smoking for his own good and for the happiness of his partner, the relationship, the kids, and so on, he ends up burning out because he doesn't actually want to do it. Okay? So very important, change. Yes, do I want to do it? Do I truly want this change or not? Because if you don't truly want it, don't even start doing these things. Find yourself someone who says, I'm fine with you smoking, drinking, doing drugs, cheating on me, leaving me later. I mean, find someone who's okay with that. They exist, they do. Ken said, hi, Daniela. If a woman tells you that you're a unique person but then disappears, does she do it because she can't change you, or is it always just an excuse? It depends on what she means by unique. Unique isn't necessarily a positive thing. I mean, a serial killer who kills people and chops them up in the fridge is unique, but that's not necessarily a good thing. No, obviously I'm joking, Ken, but this means that just because she tells you you're unique doesn't necessarily mean she means it in a good or positive way. Maybe she does, but if she runs away, it means you're unique, just not the kind she needs or wants. Carlos says, in some memes, they joke about how she leaves him after changing him because he's no longer the one she fell in love with. How much truth is there in that? Good question, Carlos. And sometimes it is like that, because when the man actually does change, it's not that she leaves him because he's no longer the person she fell in love with. That explanation is a bit simplistic and reductive. In reality, she leaves him because the dysfunctional dynamics that kept her attached are no longer there. And so if she became attached because of a dysfunctional issue, like I explained earlier, maybe, for example, he reminds me of my father who had problems and I wanted to change him. Now he no longer reminds me of that person. And if the woman in the meantime hasn't matured, this is a great question because it allows me to explain this. If the woman hasn't matured while he has, then he's no longer the dysfunctional figure she had originally fallen for. Let's say gotten badly and deeply attached to. It's not really love, and so she ends things because she no longer feels that unhealthy, persistent hook that had tied her to him. Thank you, everyone. Let's see if there are any more questions. I'll answer. That's it. No more questions, or we'll be here until 1 in the morning. Salvo says, Daniela, if a woman significantly changes a man, is there a reward? What does a woman gain from always being on an uphill climb? So what does a woman gain from always being on an uphill climb? She distracts herself from her own issues, feels personal satisfaction from the change, and deludes herself into thinking things can get better. And that's everything I explained during the live stream. Prizes? I don't know. Well, speaking as a woman, I can tell you that in some cases with my exes and even with my current boyfriend, I've managed to change certain things and make them more functional. What you gain is that from that perspective, you obviously feel more at ease. But if there are some major dysfunctional dynamics and so on, the man can also benefit from it if he too wants that change. And in theory, what you gain is actually greater peace of mind, even though in my personal experience, I think it's a bit like, well, you know, those dams that beavers build, right? You know what I mean? You block the water here and it comes out over there. You patch it up here and it leaks somewhere else because the current still flows, right? So even if I solve the problem here, it doesn't mean another problem won't pop up somewhere else, and so on. There's no guarantee. There never is a guarantee. In fact, in my opinion, the best resource people have is being able to manage themselves, to adapt according to the situation, and if necessary, to find solutions. The important thing, and I want to emphasize this, is that in a couple, there should be team effort, that is teamwork, and that people work together to improve their relationship rather than seeing each other as enemies. I mean, if I push you to change something, you need to see it as a benefit. Otherwise, I'm hurting you and you'll see me as an enemy, right? This is the main concept. And of course, it works both ways, okay? So this is what matters most. I've told you everything, guys. I'd like to remind you that free consultations are available for those who want to continue their journey. You can send an email or a message to the WhatsApp message center. Simone asked, what motivates men to accept imposed changes? Oh, that's what he was replying to. Now I get it. I wouldn't say the vagina. Sometimes, in certain cases, yes, but sometimes it's also the need to have someone by your side, the need to feel loved, and also what the person said. Write to me, come on. Bye guys, good night to everyone.